You may be seated. To the listening public, we apologize for the disruption. We had the electricity timeout, so the generator kicked in. The Honorable Premier was in the process of making a motion in respect of Motion 1 of 2026. Leave has been granted for Motion 1 of 2026, 2 of the 13th session, to be moved by the Honorable Premier. I'll invite the Premier to start again.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Whereas the second session of the 13th House of Assembly of Anguilla has been summoned earlier than planned by Her Excellency, acting on my advice in order to progress the Customs Temporary Modification of Valuation of Import Duty Act 2026, which is of an urgent nature and necessary to provide for and protect the well-being of the people of Anguilla. And whereas Rule 13 of the House of Assembly Procedure Rules provides that 1, at the start of each session, the Premier shall move a non-substantive motion that the Assembly has considered the government's legislative program, and 2, the Premier's speech in support of the motion referred to in Rule 13.1 shall be known as the opening address. And whereas the immediate focus of this government is to provide urgent and direct relief to the people of Anguilla, be it resolved that this House of Assembly suspends Rule 13.1 of the House of Assembly Procedure Rules, and be it further resolved that the Honorable Premier shall move the motion for the consideration of the government's legislative program and deliver the opening address on Tuesday, 14th April 2026.
Is there a seconder in respect of Motion 1 of 2026?
Madam Speaker, I rise to second.
Thank you. I now invite the members to make any contributions in respect of the motion. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Valley North.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I wish to put on record my sincerest gratitude to my colleagues, the Honorable Premier and the Honorable Minister, Mr. Kyle Hodge, for the outstanding work that they have done to progress this piece of legislation. I also want to thank the previously acting Premier, Mr. Jose Vanterpool, for the work he also did in the Premier's absence to ensure that we were able to get to the stage where we are at today. And Madam Speaker, the reality is that what's happening today has not occurred in a vacuum. It is as a result of a well-planned and well-thought-out relief response to the geopolitical situation that is existing globally and that Anguilla is naturally being affected by. The government of Anguilla's response, Madam Speaker, generally took the following approach: tracking all of the changes and development in the global space. This is the war, the price of oil, policy and tariffs generally, Madam Speaker. Determining the most beneficial policy direction to respond to that.
Honorable member, I'm only going to interrupt you for this one reason. We have the substantive bill that's going to be on the floor, and I'm wondering if you're minded to save the contribution and consolidate it then and focus on the motion, or would you want to make it now? Because if you do, then you're not going to be able to make a submission on the substance of the bill later on.
Okay, so I will hold it for then,
That might be the preference, because if I give leave for you to do that, then everybody else does it, then nobody gets to speak again on the actual bill.
All right, no problem, Madam Speaker, sure.
Is that a fair approach? So
Yes.
this is in respect of the motion to suspend and to adjourn to next sitting for the opening address.
Okay.
And I don't believe that it's contentious. If anybody else has any contributions to that motion in and of itself, I suspect not, but I don't want to preempt. If you don't, I would invite the mover to make any final contributions in respect of the motion to suspend. And if not, I think we can put that to the vote so we can get to the meat and potatoes of the matter.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I wish to thank the members of this Honorable House for their support or their acquiescence to this motion. I have no further statements in relation to this motion. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Premier. In respect of the motion that is before us, the question is, honorable members, that Rule 13 be suspended for the purposes of this sitting, such that the opening address be adjourned to the April 14th sitting. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. The ayes have it. The motion is carried, and Rule 13 is suspended for this sitting. I now invite the Honorable Premier to move a second motion, Motion 2 of 2026.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I beg your leave to move motion 2 of 2026-2 of 13 HOA for the suspension of Rule 31-1 and Rule 44. Madam Speaker, the request for the suspension of Rules 31-1 and Rule 44 are in relation to the rule requiring that no member shall ask a question or make a motion unless they have given notice in writing of such or motion either at some previous sitting of the House of Assembly or to the clerk not less than 3 days prior to the House of sitting of the House of Assembly at which such question is to be asked or motion to be made. And Madam Speaker, just for clarification, the notice of questions and motions is at section 32(1), to which I am reading. And the section Rule 44 requires that every bill shall be read 3 times prior to being passed, and no bill shall pass through more than 2 readings at any one sitting, unless this rule has been formally suspended for the purpose. And Madam Speaker, based on the urgent need to be before the House today, and based on the circumstances as we will go through in terms of the substantive motion itself, we are requesting that both Rule 32-1 and Rule 44 be suspended. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Is there a seconder for the motion?
Madam Speaker, I rise a second.
Leave was granted. Yeah. Thank you, Honorable Member. Just so the public is following us, in terms of the standing orders, what the Honorable Premier has asked that this Honorable House consider is suspending Rule 32, subsection 1, in respect of the notice requirement for presentation of motions and bills to this House, on the basis that there is an urgency and a necessity for this motion and the bills subsequent for the best interest and well-being of the people of Anguilla. Are there any contributions in respect of the substantive motion 2 of 2026 that is on the floor? And again, I just repeat that in respect of substantive contributions, you will have an opportunity to do so at the appropriate time. If there are no contributions in respect of the motion, does the honorable member wish to speak any further to the motion?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I wish to thank the honorable members of this House for their acquiescence to this motion.
Honorable members, this motion is in relation to Standing Order 44. It is a standing order that we do take quite seriously, but because it only allows the Speaker to suspend the rules so that 3 readings can proceed in one sitting. In these circumstances, I will put the question. I propose that Rule 32(1) and 44 of the House of Assembly Procedural Rules 2021 be suspended for the purpose of this sitting. Rule 32(1) requires 3 days written notice of questions and motions. Rule 44 provides that no bill shall pass through more than 2 readings at any one sitting. The suspension of these rules is necessary, having regard to the circumstances which caused this House to be convened on short notice. I therefore put the question to the honorable members that the motion, as moved by the honorable member for Sandy Hill, be passed as a resolution. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. The ayes have it. This motion 2 of 2026 has become a resolution of the House. We may proceed with the order paper.
Personal explanations? None. Other business, government business? A bill for customs temporary modification evaluation of import duty, Act 2026, first reading.
Honorable members, I call upon the mover, the Honorable Premier, to move for the first reading of a bill for the Customs Temporary Modification of Valuation of Import Duty Act 2026.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I beg to move that the bill shortly entitled a bill for customs temporary modification of valuation of Import Duty Act 2026 be read a first time.
Are there any, a seconder? I invite a member to second.
Madam Speaker, I rise to second.
Thank you, honorable member. If there are no objections to the introduction of the bill, I wish to put that the question that the bill be read a first time. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. The ayes have it. I call upon the clerk to read the bill a first time.
An act to provide for a temporary modification of the valuation of imported goods for the purpose of assessing import duty at ad valorem rates and for related matters.
Honorable members, I declare that the bill has been read a first time.
A bill for customs temporary modification of valuation of import duty act 2026, second reading.
I call upon the honorable premier in respect of the second reading of the bill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I beg to move that the bill shortly entitled A Bill for Customs Temporary Modification of Valuation of Import Duty Act 2026 be read a second time.
Seconder?
Madam Speaker, I rise to second.
Thank you. It has been moved and seconded. I now invite the mover to state the objects and principles of this bill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I rise in relation to the bill shortly entitled the Customs Temporary Modification of Valuation of Import Duty Act 2026 being presented in this honorable House. This bill is a temporary but important measure brought at a time when households and businesses in Anguilla continue to feel the effect of rising external costs in their daily lives. It is a practical and time-bound intervention intended to provide some measure of relief during a period of continued volatility in shipping, freight, insurance, and other import-related costs. Madam Speaker, the bill does one clear thing. For a temporary period of 3 months, it changes the basis on which import duty is calculated for goods charged at ad valorem rates. At present, import duty is assessed on the full landed cost of goods. That means the value includes not only the price of the goods themselves, but also freight, insurance, and other shipping-related charges. Under this bill, for the temporary period, import duty will instead be calculated on a free on board basis. That is, on the price of the goods at the place of export, excluding freight, insurance, and the other costs associated with bringing those goods to Anguilla. In practical terms, Madam Speaker, this means that for a defined period when freight and shipping costs rise sharply, those additional external costs will no longer continue to enlarge the duty base on which import duty is charged. That is the change this bill makes. It is focused, it is temporary, and it is intended to provide relief where relief is justified. The rationale for this measure is straightforward. Anguilla is a small and highly import-dependent economy. We import the vast majority of what we consume and use: food, household goods, building materials, business inputs, and a wide range of essentials. When global instability drives up freight, insurance, and shipping costs, those increases are already felt across the economy. But under the current valuation framework, those same costs also become part of the taxable base for duty. So the pressure is multiplied. The external shock does not stop at the dock. It follows the goods into the tax calculation itself. Madam Speaker, that is precisely the issue this bill seeks to address. This is not a permanent rewriting of the customs system. It is not an abandonment of fiscal responsibility. It is not an untargeted concession without limit or structure. It is a temporary stabilization measure designed to cushion the impact of unusual and elevated external costs while preserving government's ability to monitor conditions carefully and reassess the position after the 3-month period expires. The bill also makes clear that this temporary arrangement applies only to goods imported on or after commencement, and that it does not disturb duties already properly chargeable before that date, nor does it alter the established customs machinery for entry, verification, valuation review, reassessment, or collection. In other words, Madam Speaker, this is a measured intervention, not a disruption of the wider legal and administrative framework. But this bill must also be understood in its wider context. It forms part of a broader package of temporary measures advanced by the government in response to the cost pressures now affecting our people and our economy. In addition to this temporary modification of the import valuation base, government has also advanced the temporary suspension of import duty on fuel and the customs service fee on gasoline and diesel imports for an initial 3-month period at an estimated revenue cost of approximately $1.5 million. Government has also intervened to cushion the increase in the electricity fuel surcharge by maintaining the surcharge at 42 cents per kilowatt hour for most customers and capping it at 65 cents per kilowatt hour for the accommodation sector, with government covering the difference. That support alone carries an estimated initial fiscal cost of more than $6 million. The measure before this House today is expected to carry a revenue impact of approximately $2.4 million over the 3-month period. Taken together, these interventions amount to over $10 million in support in the near term. Madam Speaker, this is a substantial intervention by government to shield households and businesses from external shocks. But it is being advanced based on careful judgment and not exuberance. At the end of February 2026, Anguilla's fiscal performance was encouraging. Total revenue stood at $120.08 million, modestly ahead of profile, and expenditure remained contained overall. That performance was supported in significant measure by strong AI domain revenues, which brought first quarter collections to roughly $77.7 million. But, Madam Speaker, I want to frame that position with discipline and realism. Strong revenue performance, particularly early in the year, should not lead us to excitement or complacency. Not every revenue line is performing at the same level. Some are moderate, some are more volatile. Import duties, for example, were only modestly above profile by February, and within that category, there were clear timing effects and collection variances. Other non-tax revenues have been softer. So while the overall picture is positive, it is not uniformly strong across every line of revenue, and it would not be responsible to speak as though all fiscal constraints have disappeared. We know too that the first quarter is often one of the stronger periods for government revenue performance, while later parts of the year, particularly the third quarter, can be leaner. Madam Speaker, prudence must never come before an excuse. So prudence must never become an excuse for inaction. Fiscal responsibility must not be interpreted as standing aside while external shocks work their way through every corner of our economy. Leadership requires balance. It requires discipline, yes, but it also requires responsiveness. It requires a government prepared not merely to observe hardship, but to act where action is justified, proportionate, and possible. This bill is an expression of that principle. It says that in a moment of strain, we will not stand idly by and allow external cost pressures to cascade unchecked through every layer of our economy. It says that where the law permits us to act temporarily and sensibly in the public interest, we will do so. It says that this government understands that sound public finance is not an end in itself. It is a means by which we protect people, preserve stability, and create conditions for resilience. Madam Speaker, the people of Anguilla expect seriousness from their government. They expect compassion, but they also expect competence. They expect us to measure carefully, to act responsibly, and to stand with them when international events beyond our shores begin to affect life within our homes, our businesses, and our communities. And so I say plainly, this government will continue to govern with steadiness, with discipline, and with purpose. We will not gamble with the public finances, but neither will we shrink from using them wisely and temporarily to protect our people when circumstances demand it. We will continue to act, not carelessly, not theatrically, and not for applause, but because this is what serious government requires. This is a government that understands that the cost of living is not an abstract phrase. It is the cost of feeding a family, keeping a business open, paying a light bill, restocking a shelf, and completing a home. And where we can provide relief in a way that is lawful, measured, temporary, and fiscally responsible, we will do so. It is the cost of putting people first. Madam Speaker, I therefore look forward to presenting this Customs Temporary Modification of Valuation of Import Duty Act 2026 in this Honorable House. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member for Sandy Hill. Does anyone else wish to speak? I recognize the Honorable Leader of Opposition.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Good afternoon to you, Madam Speaker. Good afternoon to the members of this Honorable House. I want to say welcome back to everyone and hope that everyone had time to refresh, rejuvenate, and be ready for this second session of the Anguilla House of Assembly. Madam Speaker, I stand in support of this bill entitled A Bill for Customs Temporary Modification of Valuation of Import Duty Act 2026. And I want to commend the government of Anguilla for this relief measure. But Madam Speaker, I stand here to state that the government of Anguilla has not gone far enough. Anguilla is an import-dependent country, Madam Speaker. And prior to implementation of the goods and service tax, import duty was the main revenue earner for Anguilla. Now that the goods and service tax, which is now gone, replaced by the goods tax and the general services tax, and we have the .ai domain name registration revenue, these are the major revenue earners and sources. I think that it's high time to review the way customs duties are calculated and to consider permanent removal of freight and insurance costs from the calculation of import duties. And Madam Speaker, this is of significant concern because back in 2010, when the Anguilla United Movement administration came in, you know, there were no reserves, there were deficits. Similarly, in 2020, when the APM, Anguilla Progressive Movement, came in, And so there has to be prudent management of the public purse. Madam Speaker, though, when better can be done, then better should be done. And that is why we think at this time, when consideration should be given to providing relief for the people of Anguilla in a manner that has a significant impact, then it should be considered. Madam Speaker, given the volatility of global markets and geopolitical impacts on supply chains and on shipping costs, during and post-COVID, the APM had proposed capping the amount for freight costs considered in the calculation of customs duties. And that was a time, Madam Speaker, when we did not have $300 million in reserves. Madam Speaker, I don't know if we still have $300 million in reserves because we're still awaiting that information. But Madam Speaker, capping freight, because freight was so volatile, we felt that would certainly help to decrease the cost of items on the shelf, because the businesses then would have a more predictable calculation as to what their costs were on duties. And so I think at this time, now that the .ai revenues are being boosted to bring in significant numbers, the first quarter bringing in $77 million when the projections were just over 230 million, 77 million. I think that it is time for further relief to be given to the people, including full permanent consideration for removal of the freight and insurance calculations and the import duty. These expected benefits, Madam Speaker, would be lower prices in the stores, predictability for businesses with greater stability in their pricing strategies, economic relief for Anguillians with a decrease in cost of living, more disposable income, and increased economic well-being. Madam Speaker, the government of Anguilla's intention is to reduce the impact of rising and potentially increasing external costs on importers and consumers, and to provide short-term relief in anticipation of continued pressure on global prices. Commendable, Madam Speaker. But certainly the people of Anguilla deserve more. In addition to the policy measures implemented by the former APM administration, including Senior Shield, Junior Shield, removal of property tax for the residencies, increased contributions for vulnerable families, food vouchers for elderly, and electricity credits for over 6,000 homes, I propose a relief package for the next 12 to 18 months, Madam Speaker. And this would allow our residents and businesses to benefit more and plan better for the foreseeable future. And with your permission, Madam Speaker, may I read what that proposal was, which was made public.
Which proposal, sorry?
It's a proposal that I presented in written and in voice form to the people of Anguilla a few weeks ago.
You may proceed.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Appreciate it. Number one, that we would reduce import duties. And I'm glad to see that the government has taken this into consideration. This bill addresses that, but for 3 months, which is not long enough. This measure should be implemented for at least 12 months, and as stated earlier, considered as a permanent measure. Number two, continue and expand on electricity credits. The government of Anguilla proposal to subsidize the fuel surcharge for Anglec provides some relief to residents and businesses, Madam Speaker. And it is good to see that this administration is willing to provide relief. Previously, this AUF administration saw this type of relief as handouts and stated the opposition pre and post the 2025 election. Renewable energy, Madam Speaker, there should be a full transition, as previously proposed by the APM administration. This would now have put us in a much better position when the cost of fuel has astronomically increased, when shipping has increased. If we had gone to renewable energy, solar, wind, both, Madam Speaker, we would not be hampered right now by these increasing costs when you go to the pump and see that the cost of a gallon of gas is over $18 EC. And when you look at other places, you see $7 and $8 US per gallon. We know, Madam Speaker, that that is right at our doorstep. And that is why I propose, Madam Speaker, that this bill, which helps, should be extended for a longer period of time to continue that relief, Madam Speaker, which is necessary for the people of Anguilla. Madam Speaker, direct investment in Anglec would be helpful at this time also. The government of Anguilla owns or controls 79% of the shares in Anglec. A direct government investment would ease the pressure and allow Anglec to incur less debt and move toward increasing energy independence and decreasing cost of electricity. This is one time, Madam Speaker, when the AUF administration should pause, reassess, and reprioritize a full transition to renewable energy and a more viable Anglec versus buying a house in London, which the people of Anguilla do not want. Number 4 was removal of the Universal Social Levy, the USL. This would provide immediate relief for workers and businesses. 3% more to take home for employees and 3% more for businesses to manage rising costs, to keep people employed, and to allow more innovation. This would increase spending power, thus stimulating the economy, Madam Speaker. You may ask why the APM did not implement these measures. Madam Speaker, we did not have the resources. When we came in 2020, there was a $97.1 million deficit. Madam Speaker, the country was closed down. Our main economy, tourism, was shuttered. And Madam Speaker, there was no money to even pay civil servants, who were the ones expected to keep the economy going. But even though we did not have the resources, Madam Speaker, we implemented relief measures when we could do better to reduce the cost of living as we went on. I mentioned some of those earlier. And Madam Speaker, it is noted and noteworthy that we did not have the flexibility that this current administration has, because we had to meet the 3 guidelines, which we did through prudent management of the public finances. We were held to stricter and higher standards, Madam Speaker. And that is why this administration has the flexibility they have to spend the public purse like they are doing, Madam Speaker. And that's why I think, Madam Speaker, it is important and imperative that the people of Anguilla benefit from this ability. They have made the sacrifices, Madam Speaker. They did the hard work. They committed themselves. And now that we have the funds and the reserves, Madam Speaker, it is time that the people benefit. And I just would like to commend the former APM administration, a team of rookies, Madam Speaker, who withstood the test of time. Madam Speaker, there are other relief measures which should be taken at this time to stabilize and stimulate the economy. I'd like to mention tax cuts and subsidies for first-time home builders and homeowners, home buyers, Madam Speaker, especially our young people. Madam Speaker, this would allow them to get that start that they need. Increase grants and loans for new and existing businesses,